This video is presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. Get ready to smile.
Hello, baseball fans. You're watching On Deck with Tyler Redmond.
Well, there's been a lot of chatter this offseason about the Atlanta Braves, and not just the normal stuff of free agents that the Braves are picking up or trades that they may potentially be involved in or normal speculation, but also a lot of speculation around the luxury tax. So I think before we even talk about that, we got to address what is the luxury tax. Well, Major League Baseball, of course, introduced the luxury tax as a way to keep everybody competitive, keep all things somewhat equal. Of course, the lower teams versus the powerhouses of the game, at least on a financial basis. Of course, like the Dodgers or the Yankees, they're the top tier as opposed to like the Oakland A's or now the Sacramento A's, I guess, and the Tampa Bay Rays. It's a way to keep everybody honest. Of course, if you exceed the luxury tax, you pay a fine that gets distributed all throughout Major League Baseball. That's the crux of what the luxury tax is. Now, the Braves have, of course, become one of those teams. They've become one of the higher echelon teams of Major League Baseball, which means they flirt with the luxury tax quite a bit. They have exceeded it over the past couple of years, but they are, of course, now possibly facing stiffer fines if they do it for a third consecutive year. So the question becomes, will the Braves exceed the luxury tax for that third consecutive season, which of course is the season of 2025. Well, they've made one real big deal, one impactful deal, and one probably expensive deal this offseason. That was, of course, signing outfielder, left fielder, Jurickson Profar. That brought them to just $12 million below that $241 million threshold, the first threshold of the luxury tax. Atlanta, again, has exceeded that threshold, or at least the threshold of the past two seasons, as it does change, for the past couple of years. After three, though, you will face stiffer penalties, naturally. Alex Anthopoulos, he already spoke on this. He basically said that, look, the financial aspect of this, the dollars and cents don't really matter to the Braves. It's not really what the concern about the luxury tax is. It's more so potentially losing draft picks or at least getting a penalty in that form of going down in the draft picks. So for the Braves, at least, to their perspective, and probably for a lot of teams in Major League Baseball, the real loss is not money, not financial. Money does matter. It does get impacted, but really draft picks is what the real consequence is later down the road. Basically what happens with draft picks, if you go $40 million over the luxury tax, which this year, again, the luxury tax, $241 million. So if a team spent $281 million or above, they would get this penalty. And basically what happens is your highest draft pick would move back 10 spaces. So let's say you had the 8th draft pick of the 2025 draft. You would now get the 18th pick as opposed to the 8th pick. Now that is excluded if you are in the top 6. If you're in the top 6, it would be your second draft pick that would be penalized. So it's kind of complicated, but basically you get a lower draft selection if you do go over $281 million. That's essentially what happens. Now, a lot of parameters there. There's a big gap between just that first threshold of the luxury tax and that second threshold of $281 million. So the Braves do have some room to go anyway. That they have about $52 million left to spend before worrying anything about draft choices being altered. So the possibilities for going over the luxury tax is still very possible. I think that the Braves will likely go over the luxury tax at some point this season, whether it be at the deadline, at the trade deadline, or to help bring in players to help with injuries. We've seen that before. There's a lot of things that can happen. $12 million just isn't a lot of breathing room to keep a team going if you want to make any changes. Not to mention when you're down a starting pitcher, relievers, and a lot of things like that. I just find it hard to believe that the Braves aren't going to spend $12 million before the end of the year. I would just be very surprised if that were the case. But even if the Braves do exceed it, which again I believe is likely, Atlanta has plenty to work with before they ever hit, the point of draft picks being altered. I don't think that's really a worry for the Braves. I couldn't imagine Atlanta exceeding it all that much. I definitely think they'll be conservative because, like I mentioned earlier, every dollar spent over $241 million is 50% tax. That's a huge difference and that kind of thing. They will get a deal done if they see it benefiting the team, especially long term. But I doubt that they're going to want to do much over that. They're not going to want to go 30 million over that. They might do 5 or 6 million over or even 10 million. But I couldn't see them doing 30 million over. I can't, in a world that makes sense, see the Braves really going all out on the third year, because at that point they may just want to reset it and go next year and have a 20% tax as opposed to a 50. That's a huge difference. But I would also say this: there is money that can be, offloaded and give the Braves a little bit of financial protection for 2025. Give them a little bit more room to spend. Right? There's a couple contracts in particular that I circled, and I'm not saying that they're going to happen, but if I'm in the Braves board meeting this week, I'm kind of circling these guys going, look, if we can find a way to offload these contracts, we may be able to spend more in 2025 and delay their payment possibly into 2026 or 2027. Number one, and this won't come to a surprise for some of you. I've heard us talk about this in the chat quite a bit in all of our live streams. Which, by the way, if you've never joined one of our live streams, we do those at least once a week. But this is a guy who we've talked about quite a bit, David Fletcher, who we picked up a couple of years ago. He's got a big contract, and big is relative, but he's got a big contract because he's in the minor leagues. He's only gotten 2 hits in the majors for the Braves, only a few plate appearances, very limited time at the major league level with the Braves, and in large part has spent most of his time with AAA Gwinnett. So David Fletcher making $6.5 million in 2025. He's making $8 million in 2026. He's making $8.5 million in 2027. So a total of $21 million over 3 years. That's a huge contract for somebody who's not playing for you at the major league level.
In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith Chevrolet in Opelika. New Chevy Silverado 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. Brand new 2025 Chevy Equinox, the compact SUV with high-tech features, discounted up to $5,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile.
Now, this year alone, if you got rid of David Fletcher, you already have $12 million prior to hitting the luxury tax. But if you remove Fletcher and you offloaded him with no strings attached, you could get it down all the way to $18.5 million before the luxury tax, before ever going over the luxury tax, which of course would give you more room to possibly add some relievers, maybe add a starter, whatever the case may have you. The other guy that I wanted to mention, and this is going to maybe rub some folks the wrong way, Joe Jimenez. We all love Joe Jimenez. He's been a great reliever for the Braves at the major league level. We have him on a pretty good deal too. He's making $9 million this year, $9 million next year, so a total of $18 million across the next 2 seasons. But Joe Jimenez is hurt. He's out for the year. We've already established that. We know that. And if Atlanta could offload that $9 million in a trade by trading Jimenez, you would lose him in 2026, but you would bring that down even further. So instead of $18.5 million, you could potentially have $27.5 million open up that you could explore the free agent market if you wish to, or maybe the trade market if you wish to. And I think that could happen. And a lot of you guys are going to say, Tyler, we can't lose Joe Jimenez. Do you remember when we lost Kyle Wright? He was out for the year. We knew it. Kyle Wright had a great season prior to this. He had a 20-win season, the only pitcher that year to get 20 wins. He was phenomenal that year. He gets hurt, and he had years on his contract. He's not a free agent until 2027. The Braves offloaded that and didn't get a lot in return. I think you could see a similar situation here where, look, Joe Jimenez, he's been a great reliever for us, but he can't do anything for us this year, but he could offload some cash so that we could go get a reliever and possibly reset the tax if we want to. So there's a lot of room to play here. And I'm not saying that it's going to happen, but you could potentially be in a situation where if you got rid of both David Fletcher and Joe Jimenez, that's a total of $15.5 million off the books that you can spend right now. Now, it may be a little bit more complicated than that because you got to convince these other teams that, hey, to take them, right? Because it's not an easy sell. I think if you are able to get rid of one of them, if you're just able to get rid of David Fletcher, that's huge. If you're just able to get rid of Joe Jimenez, that's huge. And of course, it's going to stink in 2026 when Jimenez is healthy, but it helps you in the immediate, which I think the Braves actually really need right now. I think you may find yourself in a situation where the other team wants you to pay some of the contract. Maybe you get for Joe Jimenez, for example, he's making $9 million this year and he's making $9 million next year. Let's say you trade him to the Orioles, just for happenstance here. You trade him to the Orioles. Maybe the Orioles pay the $9 million this year. Atlanta pays the $9 million next year. You save on the luxury tax, and then you pay the Orioles for his services next year, right? That could be the way this goes. And I don't love that either, but you have to give him something. Maybe you attach a prospect with him. Maybe you trade Jared Kellick. Whatever the case may be, you could offload some cash here and recalibrate and see where we can find other arms in the free agency market and potentially the trade market if you'd like to do that. But really, why would anybody want David Fletcher? Why would anybody want Joe Jimenez? We've already talked about Jimenez. He can't play this season. A team is not buying him for this year. A team is getting him for potentially next year to bolster their pen in 2026. Atlanta, again, may have to put some money into the contract or include prospects. Maybe that team, again, pays this year. Atlanta pays next year. Other team, gets the reliever in Joe Jimenez next year. Atlanta gets money back for the luxury tax and resets next season. But what about David Fletcher? Well, to me, that's a tougher sell. Joe Jimenez, yes, he may be injured, but he's at least a major league reliever when healthy, right? We know when he gets back, he'll likely be ready to go and pitch, and that's an easier thing to sell to a team to potentially trade. Fletcher hasn't, again, played substantial time in the majors since 2022. His last appearance was this past year. He didn't play substantial time for the Braves. Most of his time, of course, spent in AAA. He was exploring the idea of pitching in AAA. It's a bit of a tougher sell to a major league club. Of course, to take on $6.5 million this year, $8 million the following year, $8.5 million following that. It's just a tough sell. Maybe you help pay those contracts. Maybe this is the contract you attach a Jared Kellick to, who does have value. A lot of people are going to point out, well, what is Jared Kellick going to make a difference? Jared Kellick does have value. He's a solid outfielder. He can hit when he's on. Not to mention, he's only making a couple of million. He's got a long time before he ever hits free agency. He's only hitting arbitration next year. So I think you could potentially trade him away to help sell Fletcher off and offload this cash. I think that is potentially a fix. Maybe you find somebody at the trade deadline that really needs an infielder and needs an infielder now. Maybe somebody gets hurt, that kind of thing.
In 2025, we're hammering down high prices at Glenn Smith GMC in Opelika. New GMC Sierra 4x4 crew cabs, discounted up to $12,000 off. GMC Terrain with a roomy cabin and pro safety, discounted up to $7,000 off. Enjoy the new year with no payments for 120 days. Choose from over 500 new and used vehicles on the lot or on the way. GlennSmith.com. Get ready to smile.
The key to everything I'm saying about this luxury tax situation is not for the Braves to free up money long term, right? I'm not looking at 2026 and I'm not looking at 2027. I'm looking at this season in the immediate to free up cash to allow the Braves to be competitive right now while not going over the luxury tax. And some of you out there are going to say, well, Alex Anthopoulos said that the luxury tax isn't a factor. He did say that. He said it in the monetary situation. Of course, he's going to say that. He's the general manager of a baseball team who wants to continue conversations with free agents, with other teams that are making trades. He's going to say that luxury tax is not a factor. That way, he can at least hear what the offers are and what the potential deals may be and take them, of course, to his higher ups and potentially make those deals. He wants those conversations and those lines to be open. Otherwise, there's no point in starting it, because if you say, yeah, we're not going over the luxury tax, and I'm a free agent, I'm like, okay, well, that means the Braves are out of this conversation. He doesn't want that. I definitely think the luxury tax is a factor. Otherwise, I think you would have seen more deals made this offseason so far. But I think if the Braves are able to, offload David Fletcher, if they're able to even possibly offload Joe Jimenez for this season, that's huge. It's huge. And the luxury tax, again, if the Braves go over this year, is 50%. But it's not just this year. It's 50% this year. It's 50% next year if they do it. If they don't go over next year, 20%. It's completely, everything is erased and we're back to normal. And I am not saying that Atlanta will or won't reset the tax. I don't know. This is purely speculative. This is purely me looking at it going, okay, well, what are the biggest contracts that we could offload no problem right now without it impacting the major league product? We could potentially offload Marcell Ozuna. We could trade him and somebody could pay this year's salary for Marcell Ozuna. He's a free agent next year. You could do that, but the Braves are competitive. They don't want to impact the major league product. That's the whole point. You want to find guys who aren't going to impact the major league product. You only want to impact the minor leagues, which of course David Fletcher would be that, or the injured list with, of course, Joe Jimenez. That is not impacting the major league product in 2025 at all. It is impacting 2026 because you're losing Joe Jimenez. But if you find a reliever in the free agent market right now, all is forgiven, right? So all this is finding assets and capital, financial capital for the immediate, for 2025. I think this could be potentially what the Braves are trying to do. This may be the obstacle that the Braves front office is trying to work around. Because, again, if they can offload one or both of these guys, that creates a whole new dynamic for what they're able to do in the free agent market. Now, again, you have to convince another team to take them, which is a challenge, and it may not happen. But I think if they can, you're looking at a whole new ballgame. You're looking at potentially signing a starter, potentially finding some relievers. A lot can happen. You may have to pay out next year, but think about it. If you pay out next year, again, you're only doing that at a 20% tax as opposed to a 50% tax. I'd much rather pay at the 20 rate than the 50 rate, in just my humble opinion. Now, if all this happens, if all of this happens, let's say they offload David Fletcher, they offload Joe Jimenez, at that point, maybe you can talk about trading for a Dylan Cease, because this is the only way we're going to be able to do that without staggeringly going over the luxury tax. And it doesn't even have to be Dylan Cease. It could be somebody else out there in the wind. I don't think it's going to be Max Scherzer. Because if they were going to sign Scherzer, they would have just kept Morton. I think they're definitely intent on finding somebody that fits the bill for the Braves. And if it's not going to fit the bill, then they're completely committed to going within when it comes to starting rotation. We've heard Grant Holmes mentioned, and I think we'll have a competition in spring training to some degree about Anderson and Bryce Elder and Hurston Waldrop and A.J. Smith-Shawver and all of those guys, which we've talked about extensively on this channel. But the bullpen, this could really help you settle the pin too, right? Maybe you don't offload all this cash and get a starter. Maybe you offload it and you find yourself a couple of relievers. They're out there. I'm not going to name them here, but they are out there, maybe even in a trade. There's a lot that the Braves can do if they open up another $15.5 million prior to that luxury tax. Because even if they still go over, that's less money that they're spending virtually for nothing in 2025. So let me know what you think in the comments below. Do you think that the Braves will exceed the luxury tax? Do you think they will try to offload David Fletcher? Do you think they're going to try to offload Joe Jimenez? Let me know in the comments below, what do you think the Braves should do? Who do you think they should go for in the trade market? Who do you think they should go for in the free agency market? There's still a long ways to go. We're only a couple of weeks from pitchers and catchers reporting, but a lot could happen in between those two times, and even after that, ahead of opening day. There's a long road to go. We will be here every step of the way. So again, please do like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell for notifications so that you can follow along throughout the 2025 season. We hope you'll be with us. Again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next time right here at On Deck. This video has been presented by Glenn Smith Chevrolet GMC in Opelika. Get ready to smile.
Baseball fans, make sure you like and share this video and subscribe to this channel. As always, thank you for your support.